Well, in this video, we're going to talk about the common pricing strategy known as price skimming. Now, price skimming is a pricing strategy that's very commonly used for pricing new products. And the reason it involves setting high prices for the purpose of covering developmental costs and really increasing the level of profit that a company yields from a product. Now, price skimming is not appropriate in all situations, but it can be a very effective pricing strategy if used correctly. Now, in order to consider where it's appropriate, there's a couple of things that have to exist for price skimming to really be appropriate. The first of which is it generally has to be a new product. Price skimming is generally not appropriate for existing products simply because of the fact that there's an availability of substitutes. And price skimming usually works most effectively when it is a brand new product in a market and there's really limited competition. And because there's limited competition, the company is given a little bit more leeway in terms of its pricing strategy and can justify a higher price initially. If competitors begin to enter the market, it becomes more difficult to be able to justify the higher prices when there's cheaper alternatives available. The other element that's important is that consumers need to be price inelastic. And what that means is customers are not price sensitive. If you're in a market where consumers are very price sensitive, where if you increase prices, they drastically decrease the amount of a product they demand, then that's not going to be very conducive to utilizing price skimming. The correct environment, or at least the proper environment for price skimming, involves one in which consumers are not very price sensitive. So if you have a higher price, they're willing to pay that. The other element that's important is you generally need to be selling a superior product of some kind. And this is important to justify the higher price point. We know that there is a kind of a psychological aspect of pricing, so that if we do price higher, consumers generally assume that it's a better quality product. But of course, it needs to be a better quality product to hold up to that perception. If people purchase it and it doesn't match their expectations of quality that were largely established based on the price point, then there's going to be some issues that could tarnish the image of the company. The other element that can exist to make price skimming a very effective strategy is intellectual property. If there are patents that exist that prevent other companies from offering the product or producing it for a period of time, it could be pharmaceuticals, could be electronic devices, that can create the conditions where price skimming can be an effective strategy. Now that we're familiar with in what situations price skimming actually is effective, let's look at a visual of how price skimming would work from an economic standpoint and over a period of time. Price skimming is not a short-term strategy. It's utilized over a long term. And so we're going to go through some of the different elements that would kind of necessitate a change to our pricing. So on the y-axis, this is going to represent the price of a product. And on the x-axis, this is going to represent the quantity that is demanded of that product. And so this is quantity demanded from the market here. Now we know from basic economics that as a price decreases, consumers are willing to demand more of them, and that just intuitively makes sense. If you look at what goes on in retail markets when there's different promotions, those sales promotions are done with the intent of increasing the quantity demanded by decreasing the price temporarily. Now, what price skimming, how this works, is what we're going to be doing is at different levels, we're going to be changing our prices. And so we might start our price here, and then we might decrease our price over time for the purpose of moving more products. Now, how we kind of make these changes depends upon the demand of the product over a period of time. Generally speaking, with price skimming, our idea is that we're going to charge a high price at the beginning. And this is done because we're usually targeting the early adopter. We don't have a great deal of competition in the market, so there's no reason for us to charge a lower price because we're not competing with anyone. The other aspect is because we are just producing the product, there's a lot of developmental costs that go along with creating a new product. And the hope of the business is that they would be able to recover those costs quickly before new entrants begin to enter the market. And then, of course, the company has to reduce prices in order to stay relevant since substitutes are available. Now, over a period of time, we begin to run out of the early adopter. All the early adopters have purchased the product. And so what the company is forced to do is the company is forced to reduce its prices. And this is done simply to continue to sell products. And so we might lower prices to attract maybe, let's say, a mainstream consumer. And this is going to be kind of your average consumer. Doesn't need to be the first person to be able to use the product, but certainly has a need for it. But then at some point, we kind of run out of the mainstream consumer. And so we have to price our product lower yet again to go after another segment of the market. And this might be our late adopter, right? The person who under normal circumstances wouldn't purchase the product, but because the price is so low, there's an incentive to do so. So that's how price skimming gets its name. What we do is kind of similar to how you would skim a pool if you're familiar with maintaining pools and that process of skimming that first top layer to get all the debris and different things that accumulate in pools. We're doing the same thing to the market. So we're skimming that first layer of consumer that's not very price sensitive because we're trying to maintain as much profitability as we can early on. And when we run out of that consumer, when our sales begin to slow, when the quantity of our units sold begin to decrease, we drop prices and we go after that next layer of consumers. And then once we've ended up kind of saturating that market as well, we drop our price yet again and we go after the next layer of consumers. And so that's how price skimming kind of got its name. It's all about pricing our products higher initially, but beginning to lower them over a period of time. Now, as far as some examples on pricing, you can look at these in a number of different areas. Electronic products typically fall under some kind of price skimming. And so if you look at video game consoles and how they're sold, they generally start at a higher price because there's not a great deal of competition and they're trying to recover those developmental costs. But over a period of time, they begin to decrease. And by the time the new model comes out, they're selling them for maybe $100 to $200. Kind of the same thing with smartphones as well. When a new phone comes out, like an iPhone, for example, its retail will be from anywhere from $700 to $750 to upwards of $1,000, depending upon the hard drive space and those types of things. And gradually, though, as new models come out, the previous one begins to decrease in price. And by the time it's maybe 2 or 3 models old, it's practically given away with a contract or sold for a very, very low price. Those are both examples of price skimming. So you do see them quite a bit with electronic devices, but you also see them in other areas.